Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Course Studio. Welcome to the show. Really quick, if you haven't seen my most recent episode on Urza's Workshop, find out why I made all of those emoji faces in a row. Actually, in real life, I did that. This card went from, oh, that's interesting, to terrifying in absolutely no time. But don't leave just yet, because you've got to stay tuned for this episode, because, okay, this card, you just know when you see one, this card's going to be very, very popular. And because of that, it might be decently expensive. So blame Eddie for that. Blame Eddie for everything. Blame Eddie in the comments below. And now, let's jump into it. Really quick, a big thank you to MTG.design for existing. You're a fantastic website, and yeah, I made this custom version of the actual card because the translated version is not out yet. And again, a big thank you to everyone on Reddit who translates these. Regardless, here we go with Bladewhip Transmogrant. Probably saying that wrong anyways. A 3/1 artifact creature zombie that costs 2 mana. Now, it can't block, but there are worse things than that, and it has pay for black. Return it from your graveyard to the battlefield with a +1 counter on it. This ability costs 4 or less to activate if an opponent controls 4 or more non-basic lands. So, this is a low-to-the-ground creature that can be aggressive. Again, 3/1 for 2, not bad at all for you to be aggressive with, especially when you can get it back. Now, yeah, you can't block, but you're going to be aggressive and swing away with it anyways, so that's fine. And this, again, is one that you can keep getting back again and again and again. Now, 6 mana is a lot to get it back, even though it will be coming back, with a counter on it. So it'll be a 4/2 instead, do a little more damage, be a little more aggressive on those attacks. I keep saying aggressive. It's the last episode of the day. I need more coffee. Anyways, it most of the time will not cost 6 mana, though, because, yeah, I mean, in a game of Commander, you're going against 3 opponents, right? And chances are pretty likely that by the time you would really like to activate this ability, you are going to be able to for just 2 mana for black, because one of those opponents is going to have 4 or more non-basic lands in play. And just to test out that theory, I mean, if you're not so sure yourself, on your next Commander night, okay, just bring a little notepad or something with you, or, just text yourself the results essentially every single time this happens. But yeah, see kind of what turn it takes to hit for at least one of your opponents to hit 4 or more non-basic lands. I mean, in all honesty, some of those times will actually be on turn 4 because players need to play more basic lands, but nah, many of them out there don't. Regardless, yeah, you're probably going to be able to get this out for just 2 mana pretty consistently. And yeah, that makes it a very, very good creature. A creature that can be recurred quite easily, quite often, and quite quickly. And again, I mean, it's not a bad body again for 2 mana, especially when it comes back with that counter on it. A 4/2 that you can swing with and actually dish out some damage. But of course, I mean, dishing out damage is just, an additional benefit to it. The bigger benefit comes with, well, certain types of decks that really like to get creatures out, then have them, well, go away, then have them come back, then have them go away, then have them come back. And we'll talk about some, commanders that like to do that. Yeah, I'm talking about aristocrat-style commanders. But before we do that, let's talk about the inspiration for this card. I mean, I assume it's the inspiration for it, and it's a fantastic card itself, and it's one that, well, sees a good amount of play, a ton of play in aristocrat-style strategies. And that card would be Reassembling Skeleton, a 1/1 skeleton warrior for 1 and a black that says, pay 1 and a black, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Now this is a very, very simple card. Again, this is just a tiny little creature, okay, just a 1/1 for 2 mana. Not really much to it right there. Now this one can block, unlike, our new card, but still, by paying 1 and a black, just 2 mana, again, you get it back from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And again, this simple creature, again, just a 1/1 for 2 mana, sees a ton of play, again, especially in aristocrat-style strategies, which is exactly where this Bladewhip Transmogrant, or however you say that, is going to find a home. because being able to get a creature back out again and again and again for 2 mana can be incredibly beneficial in those decks that benefit from creatures, well, sometimes coming into play, but most of the times leaving play. So I can definitely see Bladewhip doing that as well quite a bit. I mean, when it comes to somewhat similar ones to Reassembling Skeleton, we've seen some in the past, some even very recently. But yeah, Bloodsoaked Champion is one of the first ones in my mind that came out after Reassembling Skeleton. It was like, oh, yeah, that's kind of like that one. A 2/1 for a black mana, so just 1 mana, it can't block. So yeah, kind of like our brand new Bladewhip. But it also says, raid, pay 1 in black, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate this ability only if you attack with a creature this turn. Now, keep in mind a couple things about this. First up, obviously you are limited to just doing this during your own turn because, yeah, you're not going to be attacking with creatures on your opponent's turns. On top of that, you are required, of course, to, meet that raid requirement. You have to attack with a creature on that turn. If you don't, you cannot activate that ability. And yes, this can definitely be very impactful in many situations, but also that can be quite detrimental if you're counting on being able to get this out, but you don't have a way to attack with a creature, or you don't want to swing with an incredibly valuable creature. Nevertheless, next up, how about Cult Conscript, a newer card from, I believe, Dominator United, a 2/1 Skeleton Warrior for a black that enters the battlefield tapped, so this one actually can block. It has pay 1 in a black, return from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only if a non-skeleton creature died under your control this turn. So again, a creature that you can get back for 2 mana, but again with a requirement. And yes, there are plenty of times when you can sacrifice another creature or have a creature die in combat that is not a skeleton. But again, if you are counting on being able to sacrifice this creature again and again and again and getting it back again and again and again, there might be some times where, well, it might not work out in case, this is the only creature that you actually are going to be sacrificing, or if there's other skeletons on board, that wouldn't count anyways. Next up, though, how about Scrap Heap Scrounger, a 3/2 construct that costs 2 that can't block. So this one might be the most similar so far. I mean, again, Bladewhip is a 3/1 for 2 that also can't block. Nevertheless, it has pay 1 in a black, exile another creature card from your graveyard, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this one is dependent on you actually having creatures in your graveyard to keep getting back again and again and again. And also, in certain types of strategies, including Aristocrats, that might have other ways to get other creatures back, you might not want to be exiling a lot of creatures or something like this. Now, in a pinch, it definitely can help you out, but it's better not to really have to get rid of those creatures that you might be utilizing later for other things. So again, Bladewhip, like these, does basically have a separate requirement, but once that requirement is met for Bladewhip, yeah, I mean, as long as your opponents don't lose lands, you are going to always be able to just pay black to keep getting it back into play again and again and again, and again, it's going to be a 4/2 with that counter on it. So in my opinion, pretty reliable and pretty efficient. Now, obviously, with an extra black pip, it is going to be more mana intensive when it comes to actually, having to fix your mana for it. But again, if you're in a 2-color deck, or just, obviously a 1-color deck, you are easily going to be able to get that over and over again. And yeah, I mean, obviously, when it comes to an Aristocrat-style strategy, you're going to be utilizing cards like Viserys here, Blood Artist, and Grim Haruspex, which love creatures that can, come into play, leave play again and again and again, and do a ton of work for you. Viserys here has Sacrifice a Creature, Scry 1, so yeah, a fantastic free sacrifice outlet, being able to just get a lot of value again out of a singular creature that you can keep getting back. You can just keep seeing what's on top of your library, putting it down in the bottom of your library if you don't need it, doing it again and again. And yeah, how about Blood Artist? Whenever it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. Having a death trigger like this can be incredibly impactful again, especially with those reassembling skeleton type creatures that essentially are going to be draining your opponents for a lot throughout the game, basically just on their own. Or how about Grim Haruspex, which says whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. So again, having this reassembling skeleton type creature like Bladewhip, be able to sacrifice it again and again and again to get a ton of card advantage out of it. Again, not just replacing it, but again, getting it back out into play, sacrificing it again, getting additional card advantage for just that 1 card, coming back into play and dying again and again and again is huge. So yeah, even though some Aristocrat style decks might utilize a bunch of tokens, when you can utilize a card like a reassembling skeleton that you can get back again and again and again consistently, and I believe that Bladewhip is one of those kinds of cards, you can get even more value out of them, again because of that, non-token creature clause. Speaking of that, and speaking of tokens, how about a card like Blightmound? It says attacking pest you control get +1/+0 and have menace, and more importantly, Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with, when this creature dies, you gain 1 life. And then Open the Graves is somewhat similar. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So these token producers in combination, again, with something like a reassembling skeleton, or yeah, now Bladewhip, can be absolutely massive. Because again, with your free sacrifice outlet, again, like a Viserys here, you can keep sacrificing your, creature like the Bladewhip again and again and again, getting it back out into play, getting more and more tokens out of this, so you can get more triggers again from something like a Blood Artist, by sacrificing those tokens as well. So in a way, it's kind of like doubling up on certain triggers by giving yourself even more creature fodder to sacrifice. Though obviously, like I mentioned, yeah, keep in mind Grim Haruspex not triggering from this, obviously does trigger again and again and again, though, from your fantastic Bladewhip. And speaking of fantastic, I mean, if you've got the budget for it in a Aristocrat style deck, you probably have a Phyrexian Altar. Goodness gracious, this card is good with cards like Reassembling Skeleton and now the new Bladewhip. Sacrifice a creature at 1 mana of any color. So basically, you are getting half the amount of mana back that you need to put into Bladewhip. Again, just sacrifice it at a black. Now, I mean, this is again assuming that the -4 on that cost. If your opponent has 4 or more non-basic lands, so essentially you get a black mana back. You're basically only having to pay a single black mana then to get Bladewhip back out, which of course can get incredibly absurd when you've got your engine going and once you're set up properly. So yeah, Bladewhip I think can fit right into an Aristocrat style strategy and definitely find a home there. So because of that, I mean, the first one that comes to my mind, the first commander that comes to my mind when I think of Aristocrats is Teysa Karlov. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a opponent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. And on top of that, because it didn't really need that anyways, creature tokens you control Vigilance and Lifelink. Yeah, not really needed, but great to have. Anyways, yeah, basically, Teysa Karlov is the Death Harmonicon commander, doubling up your death triggers. So again, if you've got that Grim Haruspex in play and you sacrifice your Bladewhip, cool, you draw 2 cards instead of 1. Obviously, the same is true, for, your Blood Artist type effects too. Drain your opponents twice as fast. So yeah, something like a Reassembling Skeleton or something like, again, the new Bladewhip is huge in this deck once you're set up properly, and you can really get the ball rolling from there. Speaking of getting the ball rolling and, punishing your opponents, and yeah, Sir Conrad the Grim. Whenever a creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. Sir Conrad punishes your opponents when creatures go here, there, or anywhere essentially when it deals with the graveyard. So yeah, sacrifice your Bladewhip. It's gonna, trigger this. It's gonna ping all of your opponents for 1. Then, get your Bladewhip back out for just 2 mana. Again, assuming the 4 non-basic lands, you know what I mean. Get your Bladewhip back out for just 2 mana, and then this triggers again because it's leaving the graveyard, so it pings your opponents again. This interaction, again, with a free sacrifice outlet, just for 2 mana, you are pinging all of your opponents for 2. Again, 6 damage in total, and you can just keep doing this again and again and again. Yeah, Sir Conrad loves these reassembling skeleton types. Or how about a newer commander with Elistil Core Sadistic Pilgrim, a 2/2 with Death Touch. Whenever another creature in his battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Whenever the creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So you benefit on both ends again, just like Sir Conrad, when your Bladewhip comes into play. Cool, I gained a life. Now keep in mind, actually, that can be a trigger that can be fantastic with this kind of a commander because there are other kinds of creatures that you can utilize, other kinds of effects that benefit you or hurt your opponents when you gain life, so that's great. And on top of that, of course, when you sacrifice your Bladewhip or when it dies, you drain all of your opponents 1, you get it back, you do it again, and again, and again, benefiting on both ends when it's coming into play and when it's leaving play. Moving on, how about Braids Arisen Nightmare, another newer commander from Dominator United, a 3/3 Nightmare that has, at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. So this commander loves sacrificing things, and loves sacrificing things that you can just get back to then, sacrifice again. Your opponents aren't going to be as lucky, most likely, They're going to have things they don't want to sacrifice, so either they're going to sacrifice something decently valuable, or if they don't, they're going to be losing life and you draw cards. So again, a Reassembling Skeleton type creature like this new Bladewhip can go really far in a deck like this and do a ton of work for you. Speaking of a ton of work, this commander is gross and absolutely loves those type of creatures. Kuon Ogre Ascendant. A 2/4 Ogre Monk that has at the end of the turn, if 3 or more creatures are put in graveyards from play this turn, flip Kuon Ogre Ascendant, and well, flips to Kuon's Essence at the beginning of each player's upkeep. The player sacrifices a creature. So again, an incredibly brutal effect that players are not going to be able to avoid. And, I mean, obviously after you sacrifice 3 creatures or whatnot to ensure that you get this trigger, or you get to flip essentially. But yeah, it's gonna happen, okay? But then of course you have a repeatable way to just keep getting creature fodder out with your brand new Bladewhip. And finally, one last commander I want to bring up is Sekuar Deathkeeper. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, put a 3/1 black and red Greyborn creature token with haste onto the battlefield. So this commander can be very aggressive, and again, by sacrificing non-token creatures like Reassembling Skeleton and now Bladewhip again and again and again, you are able to make a massive army that can hit really hard and really quickly. So yeah, basically just paying, 2 mana again, essentially, for, a 3/1, plus a lot of other, again, death triggers most likely as well. You're going to have a lot of other ways to make tokens off of your creatures dying too. I mean, like, again, open the graves, etc., etc., etc. Have fun with your massive army. Have fun taking out your opponents. Have fun aristocrating them out of the game. But now, as this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to give you my final thoughts on Bladewhip Transmogrant, or however you say that. Yeah, I definitely see a lot of Reassembling Skeleton in this card, and yes, while there is, again, that requirement that, hey, you pretty much need that ability to cost 4 or less to really make this card worth it in the decks that want to run it. But, again, I do urge you, if you are hesitant about that, just on your next commander night, okay? Get a notepad and just take note of, how many non-basic lands are played, or, what turn it is when one of your opponents has 4 non-basics in play. I bet it's going to be sooner than you think. So then, yeah, I mean, this costing just 2 mana to get back again and again and again, or essentially 1 if you've got Phyrexian Altar for you non-budget players out there. Yeah, that can provide you an absurd amount of value throughout the game, especially in aristocrat-style strategy. Yeah, this definitely has a home there. And Marionette Master, I forgot to bring that up. Yeah, that gross. Drain your opponents even faster. Have fun! But yeah, speaking of having fun, make sure you check out my other spoiler episodes, my other quick takes, and stay tuned to this channel for even more exciting quick takes and spoilers in the near future. I said in the near future, not coming up, because this is probably going to be the last episode today. I need some coffee and a slight break. And with that, the show has come to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.